I walked into my engagement party expecting the happiest night of my life. Instead, I found my fiancé holding hands with my cousin in a quiet hallway. They pulled apart the moment they saw me, and both claimed it wasn't what it looked like. I wanted to believe them, but the truth I uncovered over the next few weeks revealed a secret that had been buried for more than 20 years, and it changed everything. But before we start today's story, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. My name is Lucas Bennett, and I'm 31 years old. 3 months before my wedding, I thought my life was exactly where it was supposed to be. I had a stable career, a home I was proud of, and a woman I loved with all my heart. Her name was Jessica Reynolds. She was 28 years old, and for 4 years she had been my best friend, my partner, and the person I trusted more than anyone. At least, that's what I thought. Our engagement party was being held at a country club just outside town. Both families were there, friends, coworkers, relatives, and people who had watched our relationship grow over the years. Everything felt perfect, until I saw Jessica and my cousin Ryan Parker standing together in that hallway. Ryan was 32. Growing up, he was the closest thing I had to a brother. We spent every summer together. We shared secrets, adventures, and memories that stretched back to childhood. There had never been a reason to doubt him, until that moment. When Jessica saw me, she immediately let go of Ryan's hand. Ryan stepped back. Neither looked guilty, but both looked nervous, and that somehow felt worse. "What was that?" I asked. Jessica forced a smile. "Nothing." Ryan nodded. "Seriously, Lucas, you're reading too much into it." I wanted to believe them. I really did, but something about their expressions stayed with me for the rest of the night. When the party ended, Jessica and I drove home together. The silence was unbearable. Finally, I asked her again, "Why were you holding Ryan's hand?" She stared out the passenger window. "My grandmother's health is getting worse." I knew that part was true. Her grandmother had been sick for months. I got emotional, she continued. Ryan was comforting me. The explanation sounded reasonable, but it didn't explain the look I had seen between them. The look that hadn't seemed like comfort. For the next 2 weeks, I tried to move on. I told myself I was overthinking. I told myself wedding stress was making me paranoid. Then Jessica started acting differently. She became protective of her phone. She took calls outside. She started texting late at night. Whenever I entered the room, she'd lock her screen. The more I noticed, the harder it became to ignore. Then one Saturday afternoon, everything changed. Jessica was upstairs taking a shower. Her phone was charging on the kitchen counter. I wasn't planning to look. Then the screen lit up. Ryan Parker. My stomach tightened immediately. The preview message read, "We need to talk before he finds out." I froze. Before he finds out? Find out what? My heart started pounding. I knew I shouldn't, but I picked up the phone. The screen wasn't locked. What I found nearly stopped my heart. There were hundreds of messages between Jessica and Ryan, months of conversations, private jokes, late-night talks, photos, memories, things they had never mentioned to me. Then I found a message from Ryan. "I hate lying to him," Jessica replied. "We don't have a choice." My hands started shaking. Then I found something even stranger. An old photograph. Ryan and Jessica standing outside a small house. They looked much younger, maybe 19 years old. Under the picture was a message. "Everything started here." I stared at the image, confused. Jessica had always told me she met Ryan through me. That picture proved she had known him years before we ever met. The bathroom door opened upstairs. I quickly put the phone back. A minute later, Jessica entered the kitchen. The moment she saw my face, she froze. "What happened?" I looked directly at her. "How long have you known Ryan?" The color drained from her face. Then her phone buzzed again. Another message appeared. This time I saw every word. "Ethan knows." Jessica looked terrified, and suddenly I realized something. Whatever secret they were hiding, it was much bigger than an affair. "Who is Ethan?" I asked. Jessica sat down slowly. Then she started crying, not angry tears, not defensive tears, fearful tears. The kind that come from carrying something heavy for a very long time. For nearly a minute, she couldn't speak. Finally, she looked up at me. "I need you to listen to everything before you judge me." My stomach sank. She took a deep breath. "I knew Ryan long before I met you. I figured that out." Jessica nodded. "We dated." The words hit hard, not because she'd dated someone before me, but because she'd hidden it for 4 years, and that someone was my cousin. She wiped tears from her eyes. "When I was 19, Ryan and I were in love." I sat down, my chest felt tight. Then she said the words that changed everything. "I got pregnant." The room went silent. I stared at her. "What?" Jessica nodded. "There was a baby." For the next hour, she told me the truth. When she and Ryan were 19, she became pregnant unexpectedly. Both families reacted badly. Arguments broke out. Pressure came from every direction. Ryan was working odd jobs. Jessica had dropped out of college temporarily. Neither of them knew how to raise a child. Eventually, after months of struggle, they made a heartbreaking decision. The baby was placed for adoption, a little boy. After that, their relationship slowly fell apart. The grief destroyed them. Within a year they had broken up, and they never got back together. Years later, Jessica met me, 4 years before our engagement. At first, she planned to tell me about Ryan. Then she became afraid. Afraid I would leave, afraid I would think differently of her, so she stayed silent. 1 year became 2, 2 became 4, and the secret became harder to tell. I was hurt, deeply hurt. But for the first time, I understood something important. The secret wasn't proof she still loved Ryan. It was proof she was ashamed of her past. Then I asked the obvious question. Ethan is your son, isn't he? Jessica nodded. My heart started racing. 3 months earlier, Ethan had found them. He was now 20 years old. After years of searching, he had tracked down both of his biological parents. That was why Jessica and Ryan had suddenly been talking again. Not because they were having an affair, because they were trying to figure out how to face the son they had lost 2 decades earlier. Everything suddenly made sense. The messages, the meetings, the tears, the fear. I felt relief, but only for a moment, because Jessica wasn't finished. Lucas, she said quietly, there's another reason we've been meeting. I frowned. What reason? Before she could answer, the front door opened. Ryan walked inside. He looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days. The moment he saw me, he knew Jessica had told me everything. Or at least, most of it. Ryan sat down. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a thick folder, legal documents, old records, DNA reports. My stomach immediately tightened. What is that? I asked. Ryan looked directly at me. It's the reason Ethan started searching for us. The room became silent. Ryan opened the folder. Then he handed me a report. At first, none of it made sense. Then I saw a familiar name, my grandfather's. I looked up, confused. Ryan's expression darkened. Ethan didn't just find us. He paused. He found a family secret. My pulse quickened. What secret? Ryan swallowed. Then he said something that made the room spin. A DNA test proved the man who raised me wasn't my biological father. I stared at him. What? Ryan nodded slowly. The test revealed that my biological father was your grandfather. I felt the blood drain from my face. My grandfather, the man everyone respected, the man who died 8 years earlier, the man whose photograph still hung in my parents' living room. I looked back at the report, then at Ryan, then back at the report again. If it was true, Ryan wasn't really my cousin. He was my mother's half-brother, which meant my entire family had been built around a lie. Jessica looked down. Ryan continued. Ethan discovered evidence that Grandpa knew about him. I couldn't breathe. What do you mean? Ryan pulled out another document, a scanned copy of an old letter. One written by my grandfather shortly before his death. In the letter, Grandpa mentioned Ethan by name. He wrote that one day Ethan deserved to know the truth, and that something important had been set aside for him. But before the letter explained what that something was, the document ended. The final page was missing, and according to Ethan, the original letter disappeared shortly after Grandpa died. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling. This wasn't about Jessica anymore. It wasn't about Ryan. It wasn't even about Ethan. Suddenly, this was about my grandfather, and a secret he had taken to his grave. Then Ryan said the words that guaranteed none of us would sleep that night. Ethan believes someone in the family stole the missing pages. I swallowed hard. Who? Ryan looked directly into my eyes. His answer made my blood run cold. He thinks it was my mother. For a long moment, nobody spoke. I just sat there staring at Ryan. He thinks it was your mother. Ryan nodded. The room felt impossibly quiet. My mind was still trying to process everything else I'd learned that day. Jessica and Ryan had a son. That son had found them after 20 years. Ryan wasn't actually my cousin. My grandfather had secretly fathered a child, and now there was a missing letter that could explain everything. Honestly, I didn't know what to believe anymore. What does Ethan think was on the missing pages? I finally asked. Ryan looked down at the folder. He believes Grandpa left him something. Money? Maybe. Property? Possibly. Ryan shook his head. The truth is, nobody knows. The uncertainty was eating all of us alive. 3 days later, I met Ethan for the first time. Ryan arranged the meeting at a small coffee shop across town. The moment I walked inside, I recognized him. He had Ryan's eyes, Jessica's smile, and the nervous expression of someone who wasn't sure if he belonged. For a second, I felt sorry for him. This young man had spent 20 years searching for answers. Now that he had found them, all he had discovered was more confusion. Ethan stood as I approached. Lucas? I nodded. We shook hands. The conversation was awkward at first. Neither of us knew what to say. But as the hours passed, I began to understand him. He wasn't angry. Not really. He was hurt. There was a difference. He didn't want revenge. He wanted the truth. And honestly, I couldn't blame him. Before we left, Ethan handed me a small envelope. I think you should have this. What is it? Something I found while searching Grandpa's records. I opened it later that night. Inside was an old photograph. The image immediately caught my attention. My grandfather was standing beside Ryan's mother. They looked much younger, and much closer than I had ever seen before. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten date, 33 years earlier. My stomach tightened, because suddenly, a possibility entered my mind, a possibility I hadn't considered before. What if Ryan's mother had always known the truth? The following weekend, Ryan confronted her. This time, I went with him. When she opened the door and saw us standing there together, her expression changed immediately. She knew why we were there. We sat in her living room. For several minutes, nobody said anything. Finally, Ryan placed the photograph on the table. His mother's face went pale. "Where did you get that?" "Ethan found it." She closed her eyes. For a moment, she looked exhausted. Then she whispered something none of us expected. "I always knew." The room fell silent. Ryan stared at her. "What?" Tears filled her eyes.
"I always knew who your father was."
Ryan looked like he'd been punched. For 32 years, she had kept the truth hidden. Not only from him, from everyone. "Why?" Ryan asked. His voice cracked. "Why would you do that?" His mother started crying. "Because I was afraid." The story slowly came out. More than 30 years earlier, she and my grandfather had briefly been involved. It was a terrible mistake. One that happened while both of them were dealing with difficult situations in their lives. When she discovered she was pregnant, she panicked. My grandfather wanted to acknowledge the child. She refused. She feared destroying multiple families. She feared public humiliation. Most of all, she feared Ryan growing up surrounded by scandal. So she lied, she married another man, and she buried the truth. For decades, nobody spoke. The pain in Ryan's eyes was impossible to ignore, but then I asked the question nobody else wanted to ask. What about the missing letter? Her expression changed immediately. That told me everything. She knew exactly what I was talking about. After a long silence, she stood up. Without saying a word, she walked upstairs. Several minutes later, she returned carrying a small wooden box. My heart started pounding. She placed the box on the table, then slowly opened it. Inside was a yellow envelope, the original letter. After all these years, Ryan looked stunned. Ethan, who had joined us that morning, looked equally shocked. His grandmother wiped tears from her eyes. "I never meant for this to happen." Ethan carefully picked up the letter. His hands were shaking. For 20 years, he had searched for answers. Now they were finally sitting in front of him. Slowly, he unfolded the missing pages. The room became completely silent. Everyone waited. He started reading. At first, his expression didn't change. Then his eyes widened. A few seconds later, tears appeared. Jessica reached for Ryan's hand. Neither seemed to notice. I leaned forward. "What does it say?" Ethan looked up. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Then he handed me the pages. I began reading. And almost immediately, I realized something. We had all been wrong. The missing pages weren't about money. They weren't about property. And they weren't about an inheritance. The final section of the letter contained a confession. My grandfather admitted that he had spent years regretting the damage caused by the secrets surrounding Ryan's birth. He feared those secrets would eventually destroy future generations. Then he wrote something that hit me harder than anything else. He asked Ethan not to spend his life searching for what had been taken from him. Instead, he asked him to focus on the people who still wanted to be part of his future. There was no hidden fortune, no massive inheritance, no secret fortune waiting to be claimed. Just a personal letter from an old man carrying decades of guilt. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, Ethan started laughing. Not because it was funny, because the truth was almost unbelievable. 20 years of questions, months of investigations, endless family drama, and the answer wasn't money, it was regret. Jessica quietly wiped away tears. Ryan lowered his head. His mother began sobbing. Because suddenly, everyone understood the same thing. The real damage had never come from the secrets themselves. It came from the fear that kept those secrets buried. After a while, Ethan stood up. He looked directly at Ryan's mother. For a moment, nobody knew what he was going to say. Then he walked over and hugged her. The room froze. She immediately broke down crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know," Ethan replied. And somehow those two words carried more healing than 20 years of explanations. Over the following months, things slowly changed. Ryan began building a relationship with Ethan, not as a stranger, as a father. Jessica finally got the chance to know the son she thought she had lost forever. The conversations weren't easy. There were tears, awkward moments, painful questions. But there was also progress. And for the first time in decades, nobody was hiding. As for me and Jessica, that was a different challenge. The truth was, I still felt betrayed. Not because of her past. Everyone has a past. I felt betrayed because she hadn't trusted me enough to tell me. For weeks, we struggled. Some days were good. Others were terrible. There were moments when I honestly thought the wedding would never happen. Then one evening, Jessica sat across from me at our kitchen table. No excuses, no secrets. No carefully edited version of the truth, just honesty. She told me everything she had been afraid to say for 4 years. Every fear, every regret, every mistake. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed every word. Not because it was perfect, because it was honest. After a long silence, I reached across the table and took her hand. The same hand I had seen holding Ryan's at our engagement party. Only now I finally understood what I had really witnessed. I hadn't seen two people hiding an affair. I had seen two people carrying the weight of a tragedy they never truly recovered from. 6 months later, Jessica and I got married. The wedding was smaller than originally planned. But it was real. No secrets, no lies, no hidden chapters waiting to explode years later. Just truth. Looking back now, I've learned something important. Most relationships aren't destroyed by the truth. They're destroyed by the silence that comes before it. The longer we hide something, the more power we give it. And eventually, even the smallest secret can grow large enough to hurt the people we love. If Jessica had told me the truth years earlier, we could have avoided months of pain. If Ryan's mother had told the truth decades earlier, an entire family might have been spared years of confusion. That's the lesson this experience taught me. A painful truth shared today is almost always better than a secret protected for 20 years. Because secrets don't disappear, they wait. And sooner or later, they always find their way into the light. The only question is how much damage they'll cause before they do. If this story kept you hooked until the end, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful story. And remember, sometimes the truth isn't what we expect, it's what we choose to believe before we have all the facts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next story.